serious discussion that's going on in Topeka. It's a discussion that's been coming to head probably over the last 3 or 4 years. And depending on what happens, it will have a dramatic impact on the way that we do business in Kansas. In fact, the same discussion is going on in Washington, D.C. about the role of government, how much money that they should spend, and how much taxes should be. And so it will affect us. And we have started in the department to address that. We're attempting to make our parks self-sufficient. For years, the parks have it's gone up and down. The park started in the 50s, and depending on what the administration, sometimes they got significant general fund money, sometimes they didn't. And there was no real strategy for how we developed parks and how we funded parks. It was just kind of an ad hoc thing that we did. And for the most part, it has not served our parks very well. It's amazing how nice the parks are in Kansas, given the amount of money that's been spent on them. And in fact, when I got to the department, the number one issue on their strategic plan was to get more general tax support to fund the parks. And quite frankly, that's not going to happen. And if that's your number one strategy and it's not going to happen, your strategic plan is not on sound footing. And so we've changed that. And I bring that to a group on tourism to tell you part of the reason why. We have that's why I was almost late today and why I almost got without any fuel in my pickup, was in the legislature. We have a bill this year in the legislature so that people that want to buy a park registration, go to one of the Kansas parks, can get it at the trader's office, rather than having to get it at Walmart or get it at one of our offices. Michigan did it. They're the only state that's done it. 27% of their cars and light trucks did it. We calculated that if we did it and got 10% of our cars and light trucks, it would raise an extra $2 million for the Parks Department. That's pretty conservative estimate. If we get 20%, it'll raise almost $4 million. And that's it's just a little bit less than what we get from what used to be general fund support, but the governor has made it economic development. So, in essence, we could replace the general tax support that we get if we can get 20%. If we get 27% like Michigan did, we can. Immediately when you tell the legislature that, they ask you, well, when will you be able to turn some of that money back so we can do it for somebody else? And my response was that if we are successful in doing this, it is my hope that the legislature will see that we've made a good faith effort at really making our park something that I think we can make self-sufficient. That we can do that, then they would allow us to keep that money and we put it into the tourism division of the state of Kansas. Because Kansas has never funded tourism in the state of Kansas. And I can tell you, I assume this, but I can tell you after working with the folks from tourism, they have done more for this state with less than probably any other agency in the state of Kansas. And the sad thing about that is, it's not when you go to the legislature and ask for money, and I was there and I know how difficult it is. When we're talking about tourism, we're talking about an investment. When we invest in tourism, that will come back many-fold. And there was a Young, Nichols, and Gilstrap study that I quote a lot, and I quote it so much now I forget it, but the rate of return on a guest or somebody traveling through, what that does to the economy, the right set of circumstances, it gives you the economic activity of a community 20 times your population, and you don't have to have the infrastructure for the community 20 times your population. I'm going to have to change my speech that I give a little bit, because in most places, I'm not critical of I-70, but I tell people that I-70 has done Kansas a bad turn. Because most people's impression of Kansas is the impression they get driving across I-70. And not to be critical of the president who had the idea for I-70, but when you put in a highway, you don't pick it to be the most beautiful place. You pick it to be the most economical place, the most efficient place to put in a highway. And that's what they did with I-70. And people drive through Kansas, and I think a lot of them don't really realize that they're in Colorado until they get to Denver. And we get blamed for a lot of the landscape in eastern Colorado, which really isn't ours. But that's the impression people have. And Kansas needs to define Kansas. We need to define who we are and what we are. And it has been difficult for two reasons. One, we've got I-70. And the other, we've never funded tourism in the state of Kansas. And if we are going to successfully define tourism in the state of Kansas, it's going to take some money. And I think most of you probably know Kansas is about 47th right now in the amount of money that we spend on tourism. We are last in this region. Nebraska's spending at least twice as much as we are. And if that's the playing field, we are not on a level playing field. And it's important that we have additional investments in tourism. Now, we may not get it next year. We put in for some this year, and Jennifer and Andrew are here, and I don't think they've heard me say this yet, but I've told a couple of different I've given a couple of different speeches on this in the past month. Last year, we put in for more money for tourism, and it was kind of a general idea of what we would do with that money. We're going to do the same thing this year, except I'm going to try to get them to be very specific on here is what we're going to do, and try to make another run at it this year. But if we don't do that, if we don't get it, we're not going to give up. And they have not given up in all the years that we had what is tourism now, travel and tourism in the state of Kansas. The partnerships that they have created have been very successful. What they have done over the internet, which is the most economical way to promote your state, has been very significant. I think sometime this fall you're coming up with a new website that is going to make the old one look like the old one. It's going to be a much better way to promote the state, and I think people are going to be very happy with it. And I think one of the things that they've done this year that I think is remarkable, I think it's remarkable on the standpoint of the partners that have participated in it, had a TV campaign that launched, I believe, last week, the first of this week. Actually, I was in Shawnee, Kansas several days ago, and the folks there do watch Missouri TV and had seen the ad and thought it was a great ad. But most of the time before, in general, the people that paid for the ads were the people that were pictured in the ads or promoted. And I think this year they got it to where it's more of a state. The partners are not getting the total promotion in the TV ad. And I think that that is remarkable on the part of the communities that have partnered in that TV ad to be willing to promote the entire state. So there are a lot of things happening in tourism. I think that we're settling in. It's been great from the standpoint of the wildlife fishery side of the agency. A number of years ago, the Department of Wildlife Parks realized that they needed to be more than just a natural resource agency that took care of the wildlife and sold hunting and fishing licenses. If they didn't market at some point, we have trouble with recruitment, and we're not going to have as many hunters and anglers. It's not going to be as important to everybody. So the department had actually started to make some attempts at marketing. And when you start having biologists make attempts at marketing, you can imagine what that turns out like. And it hadn't really gotten started. They were doing some cooperative efforts with travel and tourism at the time. Now we've got tourism in our shop, and there's beginning to be some cooperation. We're going to hire a new person in the near future that's going to kind of be a wildlife and fisheries liaison between tourism and the wildlife side, so we can promote the great opportunities that we've got in the outdoors. And we can fit them all together. I think when the governor first announced that he was going to bring them over, some of the folks, particularly in the eastern part of the state, or I should say urban, were concerned. You're taking tourism over to wildlife and parks. You got a guy that all he's ever done in his life and hunting and fishing. And how good is that going to work? And I think that we have dispelled that. I think people realize that we are looking at tourism in general in the state of Kansas, how we can fit it all together. It's like we talked earlier when I got here. In the summertime, there are times you want to be outdoors. There are times you'd like to be in an air-conditioned building looking at something like this. And to get back to I-70, and I've always said bad things about I-70, the fact of the something like that. I mean, you think about all the states, the places that people can go to see former president's library or his museum, and for us to have that kind of visitation here at the Eisenhower Center, and it's remarkable. So we have something here, we have a hook to get people here, and that's the kind of thing that we need to do, is find the hooks that we have. Define Kansas the way that we want to define it. And if we can get a little more money, it'll make it easier, but we don't have to get the money to do it. And the important thing is we define what this state is. We take and we build on the history, the heritage, and the natural resources of this state, and I think we can be successful. And it's because of partnerships and all the awards that you have, the local people that are involved, and certainly I think if you've never worked with the folks from Travel and Tourism that are now in the Tourism Division of Wildlife Parks and Tourism, I think that you'll find them very knowledgeable and very willing to help you in anything that you attempt to do to promote this state. With that, I thank you for the opportunity to be here. Look forward to the rest of the day.